we just had a socialist elected to be mayor of the biggest financial city in the world. What do you take away from that? Do you think that that's going to make New York City better? Is this a good direction for the Democrat Party or else?
I feel like everybody's over-indexing on this election a lot based on what they want to see. The far left people online are saying this is the proof of concept that the whole Democratic Party is going to go to the socialist direction. I think conservatives are saying this is evidence of Islamic jihadists winning elections, or see, that's the really ridiculous for other people saying like, oh, the whole Democratic Party is becoming socialist. But I mean, it's New York City. It's a very blue place. He won his primary. When the primary was won, he was basically going to win. Cuomo probably not the best person to try to run against him for that. It's not his time anymore. I think Mamdani ran a good campaign. His stuff is funny. If you watch the videos, I almost feel like I'm watching cutouts from like The Daily Show from like the 2000s. He's a funny dude. He's good on camera, which is one of the most important things, unfortunately, in today's media environment. So yeah, I think it'll probably more or less be business as usual in New York City, for better or for worse.
Do you think it'll be business as usual because he'll be stymied and he won't be able to get the policies through? Do you think it'll be business as usual because he calms down some of the more what I would call socialist, like just blatantly socialist rhetoric? What's going to make it be business as usual?
Generally, the left doesn't overstep their legal authority, like I would say MAGA or the right does. So I think that for a lot of stuff, it's just not going to be possible. He's either not going to have the funding or the legal authority for it. And then for other stuff, I mean, I don't know. I welcome it. He's significantly to the left of me on a lot of economic policy. So if he tries stuff and it fails, then I can just point to that and go, look, like these are bad ideas. We shouldn't do them anymore. If he tries it and it works, then maybe I reconsider. I'm like, oh, maybe somehow there's some kind of external force that makes it so the city backing grocery stores or the city, investing more in like rent control property is actually a good thing. And then I would change my views on it. So.
And how are you approaching the issue? So are you looking at this going, okay, well, the economy is obviously broken. We obviously need to do something different. I have a rough idea of what we should do, but hey, if he's got ideas, let him go at it. Or are you approaching this from a building the economy sort of brick by brick, these things adhere to a set of rules? And I think that the way he's positioning this, it's more in line with the way that economies work.
I don't know if we've talked about this personally or on camera before, but have we ever talked about the concept of like red teaming?
Yes. I don't know that we've talked about it. I'm intimately familiar.
Yeah. I don't know if like real stuff can happen without red teaming. And I kind of view politics very similarly, like left to their own devices. I don't know if either political party could figure stuff out on their own. I feel like having another side there to kind of keep you honest and to kind of check you on a lot of things is where the best kinds of discussion happen. And I would obviously say that the right has completely abandoned all forms of policy conversation for the past year. So I don't think we're even remotely able to approach solving any of the economic issues that we have right now in this country because there's no serious way to have a conversation about it. I don't consider like super big price control policy to be a serious way of dealing with stuff like housing or cost of living, but there's like no counterpart to that right now. So, yeah.
What do you mean there's no counterpart to it?
As in, I don't know there's not a serious policy discussion about what do we do about housing in the United States. We're not capable of having that conversation right now because it's a very difficult conversation to have that's going to require some pain in different areas that people aren't willing to give on, I guess. Like, for instance, like when it comes to housing, people, the thing that you keep hearing over and over again is that housing's unaffordable, rents are too high. You hear that. That's like the popular talking point. The reality point is that it's like 70% of Americans live in an owned home. So, and these are your strongest voters because people that have houses are probably older, they're more committed to an area, they're more likely to go out and vote. If you want to bring down rents or if you want to bring down the cost of housing, you are necessarily hurting the people that already have homes. And I've never heard a single politician confront that reality. So there's a delusional fantasy where people pretend that they can protect homeowners, which are some of the most like loyal, like voting based people, but you can also bring down rents and the price and cost of housing for everybody else, which is not possible. And also the people that get hurt the most by high costs of housing are people who aren't even capable of voting, because technically the people that are hurt the most are people who aren't even able to move to an area because the cost of housing is prohibitively high. So it's a really housing is a weird issue that's hard to solve in a democratic manner.
If I'm tracking what you're saying, the reason that it's hard to solve in a democratic manner is because the very people that want the policies to be strict, the NIMBYism, not in my backyard, those people are always going to try to vote it down. They have the most political power. They're older, they're more entrenched, more connected, all of that. They've got more money to back elections. So all of that momentum pushes them in the direction of not only voting against reform policies, but they have the power to like see it all the way through the system.
Yeah, and it's in their interest to do so. They should be voting that way, technically. They would be making a sacrifice to vote otherwise. Imagine you buy a home, and then the next week they talk about building massive high rises, in your area. Well, that's going to bring the cost of your house down, or it's not going to go up as quickly. You don't want that. Like now that you have a home, like you want to, how many people say the house is the most important investment or the largest investment of any American? Well, I don't want you to build a whole bunch of new properties that are going to drive down rents and ultimately the cost of real estate. So you become incentivized to vote against the greater interest of the economy of the city or whatever in favor of protecting your own narrower interest of your particular housing price.
It's interesting. You're very right about that. And I think one of the reasons that the capitalist system works is because we're saying humans are selfish creatures. If you create a structure in which they can just go be selfish and we get to take advantage of the outcomes of all that selfish behavior, look at Elon Musk, right? Doing all this incredible stuff that's moving us forward from a technological standpoint. Also making him fantastically wealthy, putting him in a position where he can control like just these armies of people building all this incredible stuff. He can get his agenda done. He can influence politics, all of it. Okay, so cool. There's obviously many people that are going to argue about his level of influence and all that. But the system allowed for somebody like that to pursue their selfish interests, and it kicks off all this technology along the way. The catch becomes from where I'm sitting is that when I look at the NIMBYism, there is a point at which so many things have come together where everybody is pushing for only their sole interest that we begin to bake into the structure of the economic system itself all these deranging elements. And then it's like, yeah, you can point at housing and you can say, hey, well, it's really in your best interest to do this. But once everybody is acting like that at every level and everybody is solidifying power and voting for things that are good for only them, and then they don't realize they're disenfranchising the young and that there's a historical pattern that says you do not want to disenfranchise the young as they will completely flip the tables over and they will come for your head. That's where this starts to get problematic. And so getting people to understand that the economy is broken in exactly the way that someone like Mamdani is pointing out, he's right. Like he's got his finger on the right problem, but his solutions are disastrous. And this is one where will differ in that you're very sanguine. You see maybe a positive thing coming out of this. And I just look at history and I'm like, this loop has played out so many times and it becomes way dangerous long before anybody learns their lesson because they're not looking, they don't have a metric that they could say, oh, I'm just going to watch this metric. I'm going to try the policy. I'm going to watch this metric. And we can all agree that's a great metric, right? Yay. And then when that metric doesn't go up, they just end up blaming something else. They don't go, yeah, okay, this policy really just doesn't work. Which is a fascinating part of, I've heard you lament recently about some of you didn't say emotional difficulties, I'm putting that phrase in your mouth, but the emotional difficulties of being a political streamer, I'm running into those same things. So for me, I'm butting up against something there where I look at this, it feels very dark, it feels very dangerous. It feels like there's this thing happening, a slide to the far left, that sets off all these alarm bells in my head. And I cannot figure out how to get people to build a vision of the economy from the standpoint of cause and effect. So it's interesting to map out the way that you're looking at it. This is a red team moment. We need somebody to run the experiment. Nobody's having serious policy conversations. We're in gridlock. People are sort of doing what they're supposed to be doing, voting for their own interests. And so now this is sort of a natural beat in all of this where somebody comes in to try a new policy that hopefully will break up the distortions that have worked their way into the system.
Sure. To be clear, I don't think this is a red team moment. The red team I was hoping for was supposed to be the Conservative Party, or at least more conservative people. And I feel like they've completely abandoned the policy discussion. So,
and they would red team socialism? What would they red team?
Or I wouldn't say socialism, but just more... I guess like further left economic idea stuff.
You want them to, because
like on a very basic broad sense, the the further left you go, the more price control-y people get, meaning setting artificial caps on things, like saying insulin shouldn't cost this much, it should be set at this price, or they'll set price, they'll bring up a price floor, like the minimum wage should be this high. And the further away your price controls get from market equilibrium, the further your market is distorted, and then other things start to happen to compensate. So for instance, if you bring down the price of insulin too much, maybe companies don't produce it anymore because it's no longer financially worthwhile. Or if you bring up the cost of minimum wage too much, maybe companies start paying more and more employees under the table because it's no longer worth it to employ them, or they just shut down. And then on the flip side, you have generally, this was the general case, but again, this has not really been the Conservative Party for the past 5 or 10 years, is usually they fight for more like free market stuff. So they'll say things like, well, the minimum wage should be lower, or, the company should be able to act in whatever way they want. And obviously, in some ways, that's not good. We have rare diseases in the United States, so there's not very much money that you are incentivized to cure, because why would you? But when the government offers incentives with there's a name for like this rare drug disease program, but that the government kind of offers bounties for curing certain diseases, even though the financial incentive wouldn't be there otherwise. Like, well, that's a good thing. And conservatives would never push for stuff like that. So yeah, you have to have I think these two forces pushing and pulling on each other. And then it just forces you to be a little bit more honest about what your particular policies can do. And then you settle somewhere. Not necessarily in the middle, but even if you settle more to one side, at least it's kept more honest by your opposition.
You had to distill down, what are the two opposing forces? Are they politically opposing forces or something else?
Between the right and the left today?
I can't tell if in that example you're saying you need the right and the left to be pushing on different parts of how we, move the levers of the economy, and they disagree. And so they're each pulling on different levers. And that just sort of on balance creates something good. If that's what you're saying, or if
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay. So the way that I approach this, I think the fundamental way that people are looking at this stuff is so broken, and nobody in politics understands the economy. Scott Besson does, for sure. That guy really understands. But the vast majority of people, the people he needs to convince to be appointed, they don't understand the economy. So you run into a position where if a politician's job is to get elected and get re-elected, then they have no incentive to actually learn how the economy works. They have an incentive to learn how to make the populace feel about something that they're saying. This is why Mamdani is so impressive, in that he really understands the pain that people are going through. He can put his finger right on it, and he can say a solution that sounds awesome. But when it sounds awesome from an emotional standpoint, it will make people feel what they want to feel. Hope, things are going to get better, change, all that. Even though it is literally he's approaching people that are dying of thirst and offering them salt water. And so it's just going to kill them faster.
It's quite that bad.
It's probably worse than that. It's somebody lost in a desert and he's offering them a chance to lick the sun.
What are the worst?
It is so bad.
What are the huge, horrible worries, I guess, you have economically for things that he would present?
It depends on if you're talking about, is he going to get checked? When he tries to do these, probably. A lot of these things won't go into fruition. And so it'll be sort of this long, slow thing. But let's just take the housing, putting rent freezes. The reason that I'm so worried and find myself wanting to push just into absolute hyperbole is because when you play those out down the road, what ends up happening goes like this. The first person gets in office and they promise things that make people feel emotionally good. And you go in, you do those things, you freeze rents, whatever. And then because we've already run this experiment in New York, we know what's going to happen. And that's going to be, if you tell somebody who makes a product, which is a product or service, which is running that building, you can only charge this amount of rent. The problem is they have taxes, they have upkeep, they have employees they have to pay, all of that. And it can and will get to the point where for the amount that you tell them they can charge, they're not able to pay for the building.
Yeah, so just as a quick thing, I don't disagree with any of this. I think rent control is a bad policy. Forget New York, it's been analyzed basically all over the world and it doesn't really work.
Yep.
But we also do it everywhere. So I don't consider that a massive departure from what's going on. California, San Francisco, I think parts of LA have a lot of rent control.
Yep.
And Canada has it, the whole world, everybody does rent control. So if he does more, I don't think it's good, but I don't see that as being a catastrophic, a step in the darkest direction in the same way that all of Trump's
let me make my best case. There are 3 books that I highly encourage people to read to understand just how bad that can go. I would give different books if I were trying to get people to be afraid of Trump and authoritarianism, because that also goes completely pathological. It's pathology on both sides. But here's what I see with this and how wrong it can go. Read Gulag Archipelago, Mao, The Unknown Story, and Red Famine. And you very quickly realize that there is a thing, a property of the human experience that will trigger every time you try to do this, which is you're going to put these policies in place. They are not going to work. And because they don't work, people will resist. And when people start resisting, you have to say, what am I going to do when that person resists? In a democratic situation, you go and you have to convince those people, whether you agree with them or not, they can vote you out of office and everything is fine. But if enough people vote for socialism and they want socialism, then you start marching down the path, certainly of where Europe is going, which we can talk about some of the problems that are being born of that. But right now, you will end up in a situation where you either abandon these, as we did in New York, and then, because in New York in the 70s and 80s, in the Bronx, I think it was 20% of all buildings that burned were arson, so people could collect the insurance payment because it was cheaper to just burn the building and collect the insurance than to try to get around all the regulations. Okay, so we end up backing out of that by reinstituting capitalism, by reducing the regulatory burden, letting the free market go back and do its thing. But now here we are looping around again. Now, maybe America has protections and we'll just always loop. We're always going to be banded. But the thing that worries me is that we really will swing to the socialist side, and we will come to the point where we realize people are going to disagree, and the only way to get them to stop disagreeing is to silence them through jail or violence, which obviously is played out over and over and over around the world. Even the UK right now has just become completely unhinged with locking people up politically. So
how do you rate this as an issue? So like, there's a world where I can hear what you're saying, but I feel like we've already swung so far on the right side with Trump, who controls a much more important office, and it is ubiquitously echoed and resonant throughout the entire right-wing federal party, like through the House, through Congress, and everything else, and then our whole executive branch, that when I look at like a mayor in New York City, I'm like, this doesn't even register, basically.
So you and I have a very different frame of reference. So my frame of reference goes like this. The Republicans are unhinged lunatics when it comes to spending. The second they passed the big, beautiful bill, I knew I cannot trust them. They are not going to do the right things to overcome the wealth inequality that will lead this country into open revolution where people are getting killed. Okay, well, they're not my ally. So then I say, well, is there anybody better? And the only people worse than the Republicans are the Democrats. So that's terrifying. So I have these people who are bad, and then these people who are worse. And I mean, we can go through the mechanisms. I'm not sure if we need to, but if we do, I certainly
guess
can,
like the confusing is I hear this a lot, but then I look at like, so I was promised communism or socialism after 8 years of Obama, and I never got it. And then I was promised communism or socialism after 4 years of Biden, and then I never got it. And then on the other side, people warned of a whole bunch of horrible stuff that Trump would do, and a lot of it or more happened in the first term, and then come to the second term, it is continuing to happen. So I just don't understand the fear of like rolling. So I think we talked about this on maybe the first episode we did. Like everything that Trump has done is like very predictable. Like I think that from the first term, it was obvious that he's a crazy spender. He spent a ton when he came into office after Obama. He doesn't care about balancing the budget. He did his huge tax cuts in his first term. He's made them permanent in his second term. He's not capable of leading the country. There's a whole bunch of reasons to expect what's happening now because of what happened in the first term. And then meanwhile, on the other side, again, I keep hearing like socialism and communism are going to happen under the Democrats. It's like 98% of all jobs made in the past like 50 years have come under Democrats. The last balanced budget we had was under a Democrat. Every time a Democrat comes into office, it's on the back of like a Republican-led disaster. And it's like, I don't understand how we're voting in Republicans to give them another chance and then they destroy everything again, like they've already done, because we're too afraid of electing Democrats because we're worried about them doing a thing that they haven't done and don't really show any inclination of doing. It's really hard for me to understand.
We might have different things that we worry about. So I don't need them to usher in socialism in name. What I need them to do for them to be a not only moral hazard, but a literal physical hazard for the United States is to deficit spend. So I just rank order the parties by how much they're going to deficit spend.
In that case, the Democrats still easily win. The Republicans deficit spend like crazy.
More?
No. The
well, they want to
Republicans
add more to the big, beautiful bill. If they were saying government is shut down until we balance the budget, I'd be on team Democrat. but they're not. They're saying just add these things back into the bill. That is, again, this is not I'm going to bat for Republicans. This is like what the Republicans are doing is completely unacceptable and will drive us off a cliff. And then the Democrats are like, but wait, let's go faster. That's the part where I'm like,
no,
okay.
It was because the Republicans did a whole bunch of like tax cuts, increase for funding for ICE, and a whole bunch of other stuff like this. And they cut the way they balanced it was by cutting.
They haven't balanced it.
Foods. Well, the way that they make this kind of work and the way that they didn't, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, we see this very differently.
But the way that they've balanced anything, when I say balanced, the way that they brought back a little bit of the budget is by cutting things like SNAP and Medicaid.
Yeah, but I couldn't fucking care about bringing it back a little. Like it's deeply problematic. What the Republicans are putting forward is within 10 years, you go off a cliff.
Sure.
So now I'm just saying, you've got the Democrats going, no, we can do it in 8. And so
but
now
the big beautiful bill was a Republican bill.
Yeah, what the fuck? So I think you think I am either identifying as a Republican or I'm going to bat.
No, I'm not thinking that. You're saying that the Democrats are worse because they want to reinstate SNAP and Medicaid to bring back the old requirements.
Yes.
But it's like those were things that Americans already had expected. And then the Republicans are cutting them to give dumb tax cuts and other like bad spending measures. But you're saying since the Democrats want to add these things back, they're worse, but the Democrats would have never passed a thing that looked like the Big Beautiful Bill.
So
the bill that the Democrats would have passed would have been fiscally better than the Big Beautiful Bill.
Okay.
Right?
If I'm hearing what you're saying, which is, I think, if we had just elected the Democrats and not the Republicans, then we would be in a better fiscal place.
100%.
They would be closer to a balanced budget.
Easier,
okay.
Yeah.
Given their movements now, I have no reason to believe that that's true.
The easiest reason why I'm 100% correct is because they wouldn't have solidified the Trump tax cuts, which have been one of the biggest things that have pushed us more into debt, is having these huge tax cuts, reducing your income without decreasing your spending.
Okay. My take away on that is when I look at Mamdani, that feels to me like that's where the energy is in the party, which is way farther left. It's way more give things for free. It's way more tax.
Wait, but why? He's just one mayor.
Yeah. But if you think about, so my base assumption is that he's representative of where the party is going to go. If you believe he's just a random guy.
But he's literally just the mayor of New York City.
But look at how much energy he gets, how many people in the party are talking about him. Look at the coverage.
The coverage is big, and there's people online talking about it, but he's not that. The reason why, so people are really critical of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer for not endorsing him. The reason why is because he's not actually that popular writ large with the Democratic Party. So
it's entirely possible that the rumors aren't true, and that part of why Chuck Schumer is holding this up is he's worried about getting primaried by AOC. Maybe.
He's probably holding it up because he wants SNAP and Medicaid back for Americans and not just more deficit spending and Republicans that refuse to do anything.
Well, the deficit spending, that's where your argument weakens because they're willing to increase the deficit. They are saying, I care more that people get these things than I care about the deficit. That one thing is where my brain switches on either party. The second a party says, I'm willing to deficit spend, what they're actually saying is, I'm willing to increase the wealth inequality. I'm willing to make the rich richer and the poor poor. Deficit spending is that is it mechanistically.
Okay, let me try this. I'm curious how you feel about this,
Yep.
okay? You and I are in LA.
Yep.
Okay. And we have $1,000 and we want to take a road trip to Vegas. Okay. And on the road trip to Vegas, I want to be able to buy my 12-pack of Red Bull. Okay. This is my Red Bull. We've guaranteed this. Let's say that at some point you bring 2 more friends. Okay. So we have a $1,000 budget. We're going to Vegas. And I want my Red Bull.
Yep.
And let's say that you're like, actually, I want to take a road trip to Portland. I'm like, Portland? That's going to cost like $3,000. And you're like, yeah, we're going to do the Portland thing. And also, you don't get any Red Bull. And eventually, I'm like, okay, hold on. You got all your friends voting against me. All right. We can go to Portland if you want, but I'm keeping my Red Bull.
Yeah.
In that situation where you've increased the cost of our trip from $1,000 to $3,000, and then you've cut my $20 Red Bull, for me to say, well, I at least want my Red Bull, for you to go, oh, so you want to spend $3,000, $20. You're even worse? Well, that's not true because I wanted to go to Vegas the whole time.
Yep.
For the Democrats would have never solidified those tax cuts, which is which even under Biden, it was the interest and the additional, the lack of revenue collected that was even pushing a lot of deficit spending under Biden. And now to have those solidified, they would have never been solidified under the Democrats. The budget would have been closer to balanced. It was coming closer to being balanced under Obama and Biden than it was under Trump, who was massively deficit spending more than Obama at the end of his term. Even though Trump came in under a good economy, I just don't understand how we ever look at Democrats and go, they're worse because they want to fight for SNAP and Medicaid, when it's the Republican budget that was so much more dumbly done. That's just crazy to me.
Okay, fair. Yeah. But I will fair in that you're a smart person. You're looking at it, you have a frame of reference. You sound like you're missing a key point from where I'm sitting.
Okay.
And that key point is I don't have to look at hypotheticals. I just need to ask, we're in the situation that we're in, and how are they behaving? So your example is great. In terms of, I totally get the emotion of like, hold on a second. Now, the one thing I said I wanted, I'm not even going to get, and we're driving somewhere else. And what is happening? And so I am still going to get my thing, and I don't care if it costs more money. And so what I'm saying is, even if I can't get you to agree that I think that that analogy is kind to the point of being nonsensical, but even if I can't get you to agree to that, that's the surface. What I am literally kept awake by is the fact that the entire nation is arguing up here what my wife and I call never talk about the tea. So the biggest argument I've ever been in with my wife was over a cup of tea. And after 2 hours of screaming at each other, almost ruining an entire vacation, I was like, there's no way I'm this mad about a cup of tea. So what am I actually mad about? Then I got into the like building blocks of what was actually going on. We started talking about that, which had everything to do with insecurities. And all of a sudden we were able to resolve the issue. What I'm saying is all the stuff that manifests up here at like, we've got to give this to that person and I want my Red Bull, is everybody needs to get on board with. It is the government has a moral obligation to balance the budget. So I have all of these base assumptions in my brain that paint my worldview. One of them is when you look back in history, every time, minus Japan, every time a country has spent more than 18 months at over 130% debt to GDP, they've gone into open violence. So revolution, civil war, or just default, which leaves people starving in the streets. So it's happened every time except once, again, Japan being the only exception. And we're at 122%. And growing rapidly. We add $1 trillion to the budget. So you can look at a spreadsheet and it really is, it's somewhere between 7 and 10 years from now, barring some miracle, we cross that 130% mark. And given that we are already at each other's throats, like this all breaks. So I'm just like, any step in that direction, and I'm just like, this is crazy.
Sure, I can kind of understand what you're saying. So in my analogy, right, well, it's $3,000. It's a lot for that trip, but like $20, that's even more money.
And by the way, I'm screaming at how are we already doing a $3,000 trip?
Sure, I understand. I guess my question then is, do you acknowledge, or would you say then that had Kamala been elected, if there was a Democrat Congress, we would have been closer to a balanced budget than we got under the one big beautiful bill?
It is a hypothetical rerun that I have a natural inclation to say no.
Even though all the history disagrees, all the history points to Democrats.
I'll walk you through the beats because, dude, honestly, I'll give a 30-second pitch about why I don't care Republican or Democrat.
Okay.
I really believe this country is going to default on its debt, and that will end America for 100 years. In terms of anything that people think of as America being important on the world stage, having a stable economy, being a place where people are safe, that goes away for 100 years. It's just the normal cycle of this stuff. Even China had their 100 years of humiliation. Look at what happened to Argentina, same thing. It took 100 years. They're still not back yet. Maybe they'll make it, maybe they won't. But it's like when a country defaults, it is so catastrophic. It doesn't sound scary, but it's like terrifying because you become uninvestable. And so now the part of debt that's useful goes away and you can't raise it. And so your country just gets stuck. And that is a nightmare scenario, the likes of which I really don't want to live through. And then if it's some lesser version of that, there's still going to be some untold number of people that get murdered in the streets. It just plays out over and over and over.
I don't disagree with a single thing you've said so far.
Perfect. So now it's like, okay, when I look at, if everything driving my thinking is economic, I'm going to look at the candidate that seems to have a better grasp of economics.
Okay.
And I don't expect you and I to agree on this, but Kamala Harris completely ruled herself out when she started saying words like what Mamdani is saying. He's more crystallized. He's farther down the road, but she was talking about the same thing, price controls and things like that. And for me, when somebody says that, it's just a disqualifying statement Now,
what do you think? Because Trump has said so many more things and more.
We're never going to agree on that.
Well, no, but there are some things that you would just be objectively, factually incorrect on. So, for instance, if you're worried about socialism, how do you feel about the fact that Trump now, the United States is getting shares, the United States government is getting shares in like Intel or U.S. Steel, Nippon Steel? Like that's like that's like an AOC Bernie Sanders wet dream. Oh, the government has like shares, voting shares or whatever.
Capital letters moronic.
Yeah, but a Democrat would have never done that. So this came from Trump, right? And then when we look at things in terms of like catastrophic impact on the economy, nothing that Kamala said, and Democrats say a lot of dumb things, is the equivalent to the tariff regime that we have right now that is continuing to, our currency devalued 10% over the past year. Our trade relations.
The tariff thing is very complicated because you have to devalue the dollar. There is no way out of this without devaluing the dollar. You have to generate more tax revenue. Tariffs are a tax. Look, Trump is bordering on indefensible. So you're
it's not. Even what you just said doesn't make sense, because if you're trying to generate more tax with a tariff, why can't you just raise income taxes? Wouldn't that be so much easier, and it wouldn't hurt our trade relations with the rest of the world? Or because bumping up your income tax by a few points in every bracket is going to raise you hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. It's the easiest way to raise a ton of money. But the import tax is damaging. It's destroying our relationship with so many other countries around the world, and it's hurting our domestic economy, and it's having disproportionate impacts on the people that probably need the money the most.
I think this is going to have to play out before we know if it's helping us on an international stage or hurting us. I honestly don't know.
Okay, we've got 0 deals in however many days. We said we would have 90 deals in 90 days. We have none so far.
Well, that's not true. We do have deals.
We don't. Trade deals, real trade deals? No. We've got some truths.
Define real.
A trade deal would be like a market-wide deal that dictates different terms across the different sectors of your economy. Like these are usually hundreds of pages long. That it's not like we'll tariff you 10% and you tariff us 10%. Because there's like markets are sophisticated things depending on how you run it. Like let's say that I buy milk from you and I also sell milk to you, and you're like, okay, cool. And in our economy, we also have a thing where if you produce milk, you pay 0% taxes. Well, that's not like a tariff. But that's a pretty bullshit advantage that you guys have that's not really fair. These are the types of minutia that you get into when it comes to actually writing a real trade deal. It's not just saying like, oh, blanket tariffs.
We'll get back to the show in a moment. But first, let's talk about getting the most out of your health data. Your Apple Watch collects an incredible amount of useful data, then does absolutely nothing with it. Bevel turns that data into intelligence. This is what your Apple Watch should have been doing from day one. Bevel consolidates everything into one platform: sleep tracking, nutrition logging, fitness monitoring, recovery scores, habit tracking, stress levels, all in one place instead of scattered across 5 different apps. Bevel's AI is proactive. It doesn't wait for you to ask it questions. It analyzes your metrics in real time and tells you what you need to know. It holds you accountable to your goals. It remembers your lifestyle and tailors every suggestion specifically to you. And your data stays private, stored on your device, not on servers. Over 1 million people have downloaded Bevel, and it has a 4.8 star rating. Head to bevel.health/impact and use code IMPACT to get your first month free. And now let's get back to the show. But are you saying that leading into this, that things were going well?
Yes, phenomenally.
Donald Trump is fucking that up.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we've at least now identified the base assumption that we do not share.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the international trade deals that we have, and I'm like, I cannot believe we have allowed this to happen. We are now in Thucydides' trap. We let China grow powerful because we were idiots. And this is a tale as old as time. We could have, and I'm sure there was somebody that's been screaming about it from day one, predicted that this is exactly what was going to happen, which we let happen.
Wait, what was the bad thing that was going to happen?
That we have now completely gutted manufacturing out of America.
But the manufacturing is at the highest point it's ever been. It was at Biden, it was the highest point it's ever been. We've exported a lot of low-level manufacturing, but we don't have people to manufacture everything. Like China is not trying to expand their low-level manufacturing. China's trying to grow into the manufacturing that we do.
Yeah, let me give you an alternate version of this is what I think actually happened. China admits this is what happened. The VCs are finally talking about this is what happened. It's the 80s. And China is backwards. Deng Xiaoping comes into power, realizes Mao was killing people en masse, and is basically like, thank God he's dead. We're not going to repeat those mistakes. We're actually going to let people get rich, but we don't know how to let people get rich. They ring, America, can you please teach us how to be rich? We go over there. In fact, first it starts with a conversation, I believe, with the Japanese. Japanese give them indications about how they're going to have to do this by decentralizing banking. They contact America. America goes over and basically helps them get all of the capitalist system up and running, how you need to decentralize who gets loans. You need thousands of banks, not a single bank. You need a VC environment. And so literally American VCs fly over there, of course, selfishly thinking that they're going to reap all these benefits. They get all of these companies to go over to begin teaching them. Deng Xiaoping has an official policy to bide your time and never take the lead. And he's like, this is a part of this long plan. We're eventually going to take over, but first we've got to get all this information. And so we realize, oh my God, we can get everything cheap by sending our manufacturing over there. But China's playing a different game. And they're like, we're going to start with those things, but we're going to get them to send their best and their brightest. Look at what they did with Tesla. And they say, hey, Elon, we're going to let you build a Tesla factory over here. Normally, we would force you to have 50 to 51% Chinese ownership. We're going to let you keep the whole thing. But you're going to teach our engineers. Tesla now, over whatever, 10 years, 12 years that they've been manufacturing in China, is now some tiny fraction of the EV market when it used to be 100%. And they have just learned everything they needed from him and now have surpassed him, however much, massively. And so that's the game that they've been running. And Tim Cook said, I don't know, a couple months ago, he was like, I don't know what you guys think manufacturing is in China, but these are the best high-end manufacturers. If you run the stats of America post-World War I, leading into World War II, we were the dominant manufacturing power for an industrial age economy. We have now, and that's, by the way, why the probably apocryphal quote that the Japanese admiral said when he bombed Pearl Harbor, I fear all we did was wake a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve. What he was referring to is that America could just outproduce everybody in terms of ships, tanks, aircraft, everything. And so we just turned all that machinery on to building the war apparatus. Now, flash forward, we're headed into the same style conflict with China, except China looks like us in terms of all the meaningful manufacturing like we did before World War II. So now if we go into a head-on collision with China, we will not be able to come anywhere near their production levels. So now it's like, I get it.
How would we ever expect a country of 330 million people to be able to outproduce a country of, what is China, 1.7 billion people? I don't know how many.
Of course.
How?
By keeping these things yourself, making sure that you don't let go of them, building the incentive system to keep people focused on manufacturing, high-end manufacturing, the same way that we're doing with AI, with massive investments.
But I'm saying, where are you going to get, if you want us to continue the high-end manufacturing we do now, what are we taking from to start doing low-end manufacturing again?
What do you mean, from a budget perspective?
No, from a human capital perspective. Our unemployment is like 4.5%. Where are we getting all the people to do the low-end manufacturing? We have to move people from high productivity jobs down to lower productivity jobs. We're going to have to start to give in some part.
I reject that wholeheartedly. So right now we have, it's like 4% unemployment, technically 3.8, something like that. But once you factor in all the people that have just checked out of the job market, it's like 12%. So it's a massive number that for some reason nobody talks about.
So the reason why people don't talk about it is because there's different ways to measure unemployment. The most common way is just called the unemployment number. It doesn't include discouraged workers. This is the U3 unemployment number. You're talking about the U6. People like to bring up the U6 when they say the U3 is fake. The reason why the U6 unemployment isn't the thing that economists look at the most is because there's a lot of reasons why people might stop looking for work. They might be in education,
and
they might be at home, they might be...
Totally agree, but I would put forward the biggest one right now, certainly the most meaningful and important, is that there is a type of person for whom a certain type of manufacturing job is the jam, and those have gone away. We've shipped something like 2 million jobs overseas in that core type of manufacturing job. And the stats anyway show that that is the biggest reason that your average worker has been unable to up their wages. It hasn't been the breaking of the unions. That's not correlated in the private markets to increase wages basically at all. And so, but if you have a bunch of jobs that need a bunch of workers, now all of a sudden the workers have the power to actually negotiate better salaries. Now, if we need to bring in labor, like I think the whole world, the whole developed world is about to be in a really weird position where we just don't have the birth rates. And so we are going to have to bring in immigrants to fill these roles. So having a sensible policy about how we fill in those gaps, I don't think would have been a problem at all. I think we took a suicidal approach to it, but there would have been a smart approach to get people in if there were jobs that truly Americans, they had all the manufacturing jobs they could eat, then I think we'd be fine.
So then so then your assumptions are that one, if we were to bring back a whole sector of manufacturing, we wouldn't have to take from anywhere because there's like a magical section of people that would be able to work these jobs that wouldn't
wouldn't have to take from anyone. You mean people?
As in you wouldn't have to move people out of higher productivity jobs to lower productivity jobs.
I don't think you're going to have to do high to low, certainly as the things change, but you might have to, as technology advances, but you might have to import people. I'm perfectly fine with that.
So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, so then I'm just curious I don't know the population of China. It's 1 point something billion.
Call it 1.4.
Okay. How would you expect us to be able to out-manufacture a country that's like 5 times our population?
It comes down to where you're putting your resources. So China was way bigger than us, and we were still outproducing them because they didn't have years of being supported by the international banking community trying to spin them up. They didn't have people going over there and helping them to do everything our way. We did not see them as a competitor. And so we essentially traded cheap goods to build our biggest competitor.
Sure. But eventually they're going to figure it out, right? Like how are you keep China from, like, is the assumption that they'll never...
I don't think you can. I think on a long enough timeline, you're going to find yourself in that situation. I'm just saying, don't be in a situation where they are both stronger than you based on size and stronger than you because you have outsourced your entire way of life to make sure that those prices come down.
Well, then it feels to me then like if we know that we can't win on mass production like that, that our goal would be to have higher and higher productivity jobs. American workers are some of the most productive in the world, where economically productivity is measured for how much a labor hour costs or in 1 hour, how much like stuff can you produce basically, right? So it feels like the goal then would be to move to higher and higher productivity jobs. So when we look at like what are the big things that people talk about right now, it's stuff like AI or stuff in computing. And these are the areas that America is still the leader on.
Do you steer by efficiency? Like as you try to map this stuff out in your head?
What do you mean efficiency?
Are you thinking along the lines of it is an obvious North Star to steer by whoever is better at this thing? So Americans are better at getting high output per hour work. Therefore, we should focus on that.
Oh, kind of. Well, the economic concept you're talking about is called comparative advantage, right?
Yes.
I'm just looking I look at productivity broadly because productivity can tell you the amount basically of like.
But is that your North Star? Just so we don't talk past each other.
A bit, yeah. Because the more productive your labor is, the more your workers are able to produce for the world, given the amount of time.
Okay. Right? I have a totally different North Star, which
what's that?
Explain. So my North Star is round it to national security and international dominance.
Yeah, but national security is your most productive stuff. Like what was one of the big reasons why we won World War II was because we had all of the best and brightest minds, and we were the first people in the entire world to research the atomic bombs. For people that are fact checking me, sure. But I'm saying like we got technologically there before anybody else.
Yes, that helped us with Japan tremendously for sure. But the real story of World War II is we were able to manufacture like 2/3 of every bit of equipment that was being sent over to Europe. So they were in our debt massively. We were able to aggregate all of the gold, and we were able to build our own military up at some ungodly level higher than everybody else. And we weren't getting bombed. So at the end of the war, now we have the gold. We have the manufacturing capabilities. We've got our GIs returning home, getting educated. We have a massive baby boom, right? So there's all these things that go into that moment. But the linchpin, the one thing, if you knock that peg out, everything is different, is our ability to manufacture the thing that mattered in that moment.
Because that was like the most productive thing to work on at the time. But I think as technology has moved further and further into the future, other things become necessarily more
we might be able to agree on that. Like if we end up saying the most productive thing that we could be manufacturing right now, or everything that we need for our modern way of life, technology, and war with China, then I would say yes.
Okay. I feel like those wars aren't going to be won by who can make the most ships. I feel like those wars are going to be won by who figures out like the best missile defense systems.
That's going to be part of it, but all of this stuff is a cat and mouse game. So if what we find is, hey, we're the software kings of the world, we're better at AI, and so we assume that this is going to be war played on the AI battlefield, we're ready for it, they can't fuck with us. Well, then they go, oh, but they're not ready for drones because we have the entire drone supply chain. And so we're just going to swarm them with drones. And so, yeah, like they're going to fight back with AI, and that's going to be devastating for us, but we're just going to keep droning them.
Sure, but then what do you think is easier to switch tactics for? For us to start manufacturing rudimentary drones, or for them to start manufacturing complex AI-related stuff, software-related stuff?
Nobody's standing still. We're not standing still on drones, and they're not standing still on AI. So
sure, but everybody, I'm just saying that when you look at the world, everybody wants to be like what the U.S. is. Nobody wants to be like what you're advocating the U.S. becomes. Like the people that we exported our supply chains to, they want to be more like America. They're not thinking
that's
like...
That's not true. We exported our supply chain to China, and China has no interest in being
absolutely.
Like America.
They're making huge investments in green energy. They're trying to make bigger investments into their microprocessor technologies.
That's what you think of as America?
The higher productivity, more specialized labor stuff.
Okay, so when you say more like America, you mean highly specialized,
highly specialized labor producing like end of like supply chain levels of goods.
Okay, that makes sense in terms of just being economically efficient, but I don't see how that collides with the argument in this moment. That doesn't in any way, shape, or form alleviate the need for America to protect itself, for America to be economically strong, to make sure that workers are able to negotiate their pay better, to make sure that we have jobs that fit a massive bolus of a certain type of person that we have that right now has just checked out of the job market, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I would destroy my country to try to bring back old jobs because there's some sector of the economy that...
what's the part that would destroy it?
Is regressing in terms of the types of goods that we manufacture. As in saying, like, I don't like the fact that we're making the X-87, well, I should say the F-35 plane, because we should be making more aluminum widgets. So we need to take a little bit away. But in your mind, you're trying...
Do you think I'm saying that?
I don't, but one of the frustrating things when it comes to economics is people only ever talk about one side of an equation.
I can talk about this whole thing top to bottom. You can go anywhere where you think I'm weak, and we can talk specifically about that.
But the problem is you've fictitiously invented this huge working group of people that can move into a job with no other negative benefits.
So
what I'm saying is that like for the manufacturing stuff, you are going to destroy higher productivity. You're destroying more advanced stages of your manufacturing sector if you want to bring back base manufacturing. That's an inescapable truth reality.
Okay, so that is perceived as false by me. So let's walk through and see if it really is false.
Sure.
So base assumption number one for me is that there are very capable, almost exclusively men of prime working age right now to the tune of like 8%, something like that. It's very close to 8, if not exactly 8, that are capable but have checked out of the labor market.
Sure, that's probably maybe our fundamental big disagreement. I don't think that that's necessally the case.
Meaning that stat isn't real.
I don't think so. I haven't heard that particularly.
Okay, let's just so we don't bog down. If it were true, does that puzzle piece click and now my entire argument makes sense to you and at least has internal logic though
if it was true, then I think looking for work for them might be good.
Okay.
But then the second issue, that's even assuming that was true, which I don't think it is, but that's the second issue that I have is on that road, whatever manufacturing we were to bring back to the United States would leave those people still in the exact same spot.
Okay, that's very possible.
Sure.
So now the thing that drives what manufacturing that I'm trying to bring back, and maybe it's just aspirational to get these guys back into jobs, and maybe once we really look at the kind of things that I'm saying we need to bring back, because I'm not saying start making widgets, maybe we find, sorry, man, like between AI, robotics, and just how high tech it is, just not going to be these guys, and they're still LOL or SOL. Yeah, very possible. So we'll set that aside. They're a big cloud of maybe.
Okay.
But the thing that's driving me saying we need to get jobs for them back is that's how you get them negotiating power again, workers to have negotiating power to drive their rates up, which for me is part of my North Star. It is an absolute must because you need a thriving middle class. And right now, if you can send jobs wherever you want or import people cheaply from wherever you want, workers will never have the power that they need to be able to negotiate higher salaries. So that's just like to avoid having my head lopped off as a rich person, I know I need to do that. So that's like not even just a moral good, that has to happen. Like if you don't do that, you have destabilized capitalism to the point where it will break. It's broken many times in history for this exact reason. So I guess
the sanity check that I would have here is, do you feel like this is an area that we're at right now in the United States where we've done a lot of damage to our middle class or something?
1,000%. It's mathematically showable.
Okay, so then my question is what other country's middle class do you think is doing better than ours?
China.
That I just completely and totally fundamentally disagree with that.
You don't think China increasing, their wages went up 30x in the same period that Americans stagnated. From the 70s until now, they've had a 30x increase in worker salary. Ours have stagnated.
My son grew 100 times more than I did in the past 10 years of his life because he went from 4 to 14, and I probably haven't grown at all since 20.
Like, perfect.
China's people are approaching, their wages have grown more, but that's to become getting more in line with the United States.
Yeah. What do you think that does to the psychology of a nation? Do you think that it makes them sad that they've grown that fast?
No, but they're playing catch up to us.
But it's going to make them feel awesome, right?
Yeah, but they're still behind us.
What
they're
does it do to the
us.
psychology of a nation that stays flat for 40 years?
I don't know if I would say we've stayed flat.
We have stayed flat. It's just math.
In what regard?
Salary.
What do you think we've stayed?
Real salaries versus cost of living has just it's flatline. In fact, cost of living compared to what people are making is going up. So
I think there's a whole separate conversation you could have on that.
Why do you think people feel like they can't make ends meet if everything is great?
Well, I'm not a politician, so I would say it's because the American consumer is incredibly spoiled and has no idea what the standards of living are across the rest of the world, and is constantly lied to by their own politicians about what other people are living like in the rest of the world.
Okay.
The number reality is the American consumer is the strongest consumer on the planet, and other people would kill to have the horrendous standards of living. Our homes are massively larger. We have the latest and cutting edge technology when it comes to healthcare. We invent like all of the coolest stuff here. We're not caught in these weird manufacturing traps like Germany is, and our immigrants, even our illegal immigrants, are all at work. And in other countries, they're having legal immigrants that can't find work. Their unemployments are higher, their inflations are worse. Like every part of their stuff is like not running as well. Every other country on the planet wants to be like the United States of America. And the US consumer, the only reason we can even have these trade deficits we have is because the American consumer has so much power. And there are arguments you can make around like cost of living and everything else, but it's depending on how you factor it in, it's a whole separate conversation. But like, for instance, like you could say like, oh, like the amount that you would spend on a console today is flatline. It's the same you would spend on a console, 20 years ago. And that's true. But like you could buy like a PS5 today, and in the past you could buy a PS1. So even if like technically the cost is the same or is flatlined in terms of real wages, you're getting a lot more for it. Same arguments can be made about stuff like healthcare, right? Even if healthcare costs are like fairly high, like a type 1 diabetic 100 years ago is dying in 2 years. Whereas today, it might be expensive or even more expensive because of the things they have to pay. So like, oh my God, the cost has gone up, but it's also because, well, now they live like normal lives almost. So it's hard to measure that directly. But when I'm doing like sanity checks on this, I'm just like looking at other countries. You mentioned China's growth. Part of China's growth has been their liberalization of their economy, foreign direct investment. The only reason China can even afford to grow is because we have so much money here, we have so much investment here, and we've grown also as a result of our relationship with China. And China's trying to race towards what the United States is right now. And I think it's an interesting, as a sanity check, like why, if China's racing towards to get to where we are, why do we want to go back to where they're coming from?
We don't. And so I think the strategy that Trump right now is running is a be more China than China. I think that is suicidal. Okay, there were a lot of things you laid out, and I want to see if we can start putting some of these pieces together. So first of all, you put out the idea that if Americans knew how good they had it, that they wouldn't be as feeling bad about where they are as they are.
A little, yeah. And just in qualifying that, we should always push for better stuff. I think that's great. But there are some Americans who think that like in Europe, they have free healthcare and free everything else, and they pay no, and like they think everything is so much better. Right. And it's not really the case.
You and I agree aggressively. And Lord knows, I wish that felt like a winning battle, but convincing Americans that they really do have a good, it just doesn't line up with what I know about human psychology. So the Gini coefficient makes it very clear. The studies with monkeys make it very clear. If people look around and see somebody else and they have a perception that person is being treated better than they are going to lose their shit.
Agreed.
And right now, because of a very quantifiable economic problem, we've put young people in a position where they are buried under student debt largely, at a time where the government pie really is shrinking because the interest payments are growing and just gobbling everything up. It's more than defense. It's the third largest expense that we have in the government, and it's growing. It will become the second largest expense almost certainly before the end of 2025. So this is happening very fast. So your interest payments will, in the next couple of months, almost certainly pass Medicare or Medicaid as the second highest expense in the government. So it's like, that's creating this insane distortion in terms of what they can afford and what they can't afford, because the way that the government makes up for that shortfall is with money printing. Money printing is inflation. They're not related. They are the same phenomena. And so things are becoming more expensive precisely because the government is deficit spending. And so as long as they deficit spend, they are making things more expensive for people by taxing everybody. But the only way to hide from the taxation that is inflation is to own assets. Okay, well, great. Anybody can own assets, right? The bad news is only 10% of Americans own 93% of the assets. And I'm going to guess that follows another power distribution. And of the 10%, I'm sure that 80% are 20% of the people. And so you're going to have some ridiculously small number that own all of the assets in America effectively. And then everybody else just gets absolutely hosed by inflation. And then they wonder, why can't I make ends meet? Now, when we did this in the 70s, we at least had women that could go into the workforce and start making money. And so household incomes could rise back up and match it. And cool, we were fine for another couple of decades. But we're now at the point where there's no that thing left anymore. There's no other person to put into the workforce. So I really think, despite that I agree with you very wholeheartedly, that people are in a position where they really do have it good. Poor people in America have it way better than people in other countries. However, it really is that things are getting more expensive. They really can't afford it. And the only asset they understand intuitively is a house, and houses are just completely out of reach because of inflation. And so now, because of deficit spending, they can't buy a house, they can't get out from under their debt, and they can't afford things. And so I'm not confused when they're like, hey, I really want to be a socialist. And I'm just saying the bad news is, though, that will speed this problem up. Now,
sure. So I understand what you've said. I feel like there's a couple things that are difficult to understand, though. One thing, you said that deficit spending was bad because it makes things cost more. Yes. But then I feel like earlier you said one of the big things is we have to devalue the currency.
Yeah.
So wouldn't printing more money and devaluing the currency, wouldn't this like play into the same thing when you want that to happen?
If I say you should never hit a woman, and then a woman rushes into the room and is hitting your child with a baseball bat, beat the shit out of that chick.
Okay.
So I'm just saying we're in a position where things are so bad. There are 4 levers that you have to pull. All of them are bad, but you have to pull all of them. You have to forgive some loans. Okay. And that just means wiping out the wealth of some people.
So then the inflation stuff you think isn't necessarily that big of a deal right now because we need to devalue our currency.
No, the inflation is horrible, and I'm going to make it even worse. But the only way to get out of this predicament is to use deflationary and inflationary levers. We have 4 of them. 2 are deflationary, 2 are inflationary. And we're going to try to, get it just right and get it to the point where the people that we're stealing from by eliminating their, because when one person owes debt, that's somebody else's liability, somebody else's asset. And so as you wipe out one person's liability, you wipe out their asset. And so they just lost money that they work for. And it's just gone. And all you have for them is a sorry, that's just where we're at. So you're going to do some of that. You try not to do so much that those people openly revolt. You're going to have to do some money printing because you have to devalue the debt itself in order to get out of this. You're going to have to tax the wealthy more. There's just no way around that because you got to generate some additional funds somewhere. And then you have to go into austerity, but not so much that you freeze up the economy. Ray Dalio details exactly how to do it. It's called beautiful deleveraging. No one's ever going to do it. But those are your levers.
Okay, so I guess, and understanding this, and we don't have to retread too much of this because I don't want to circle the drain on this, but when I feel like I look at all of Trump's major economic policies, all of them just make everything you said worse. That's what I feel like. So you talk about like Gini coefficient, inequality. So
out of this, your goal would be to convince me we're in a tough spot, Tom, but you're just better off with the Democrats.
1 trillion%.
Got it.
The reason being that there are 2 huge things that are easy money makers.
And really fast, just so I can map to this. The reason that you want to talk about that, which I find mildly interesting, but not super interesting, is because we live in a political world. We are going to have to elect somebody. And so let's just focus on who the somebody is.
A little bit, yeah. But it's also secondarily played into a thing where like somebody is telling you, I really, really love, I love sweet foods. I love sweet foods. They're my favorite. And I'm like, oh yeah, me too. Here's a candy bar. And then they dump like a bunch of salt in their mouth. And I'm like very confused. I'm like, I feel like something is not matching up. So like I hear you give a lot of like baseline stuff and I'm like, that sounds good. I think I agree with that. But then the prescriptions are being like wildly different in terms of my mind. So two easy ways to make money that the Democrats were doing is one is funding your IRS. You have to be able to collect the tax revenue that's owed to you. And the money we're saving here is on the scale of hundreds of billions of dollars for what the IRS itself has said is out there for monies that they could get. I think $600 billion is the last number I saw. So that's the first thing. Biden expanded, was it 80,000 agents or something? And then Trump has now peeled that back. So that's one way to do it. And then the second way is income taxes are just such a nice and easy way to collect money. Everybody has a job. Generally, people have jobs. The money's just taken to your paycheck. It's super easy to administer. It's very easy to collect. And it's very easy to kind of like target different people with different tax rates. Tariffs are like the messiest, worst way to absolutely fuck over somebody who has to buy certain goods that is more important to them. Like it's a consumption tax basically, but it's a consumption tax that's probably disproportionately hurting poorer people. So when I look at Trump, we're making some money now through tariffs, which I would argue are also doing external damage. But forget it. Just looking at the consumer. So tariffs are probably one of the worst ways to tax the United States. And then he expanded the tax cuts, which is severely decreasing our government revenue. And then he peeled back all of our IRS collection stuff because they hate it. And then to satiate our debt woes, we got Doge, which went from saving $2 trillion to maybe $9 billion, if that. And it's like everything I've seen Trump do is horrible. Kamala wouldn't have solidified the tax cuts, which would have helped a lot on the revenue side of things. They would have maintained the hiring of the IRS agents, so we can enforce the tax codes on the books, which is good. And then we wouldn't be doing this weird tariff thing, so we could negotiate better trade deals if we wanted to, or we would at least continue to have the poorest people be able to afford the things that they want without disproportionately taxing them to try to make up for some new thing that she wouldn't have continued, which was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Those are the big things that I see, and it just feels like all of them play in totally opposite directions from the Democrats and the Republicans. Yeah, it's
interesting. Preparing for this episode and listening to
we're getting really into this. Yeah,
but I love this. Hopefully, my audience at least will enjoy this as well, as we've really become an economic focused group. But there are base assumptions that you and I don't share that make us look at the same thing and then walk away with very different conclusions.
And what is the most important base assumption that you think we're different on?
Based on what I know about you, I think the most important thing is the threat level you feel from Trump. And your threat level from Trump is, I don't know if, I think you would say that at least in your lifetime, there has never been a politician that was more dangerous than Trump from we actually break the American system and we go down a super dark authoritarian path, like in reality, not in haha meme land.
Yeah. Well, I would say we're already down that path. We've taken several steps down it already. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where we disagree. I don't share that assessment. Even though I'll look at all the same things and I'm going to nod and be like, yeah, that's terrible. And all the places you would expect me to. But the amplitude of him does not hit a threshold for me where I feel like this is a virus that's going to escape the lab and this is just going to go awry. Now, trust me, it is entirely possible that life teaches me that I am wildly misreading the situation because I do think that he has authoritarian tendencies. I do think if he saw a way to run for another term, he would run for another term. We look at these things and...
Can I ask just on that as like a thing? This is maybe a little unfair because I'm sure you talked to a lot of people. Maybe you don't have all this in your head, but can you think of, if you were to think of our talk like a year ago, we both made different predictions about what we thought like Trump would look like. Do you think there was anything that I was majorly off on? And then do you think there was anything you were majorly off on?
When I hear you describe what's happening, it's not the world I recognize. So it would be, is he doing authoritarian things? Yes. Did you call that? Yes. Is the stuff that he's doing freaking me out? No. So National Guard, sending him into the States, it's weird. He shouldn't do it if they don't want him to unless something's really like out of pocket. That one to me feels like my wife, if she is about to come on her period, she really does parse data differently.
Sure.
Stimulus differently. She responds to stimulus differently. But I know you don't say it the first moment you notice it. You really got to push in deep before you're like, okay, hold on a second. I think the stimulus no longer, or the response no longer matches the stimulus. So it's like you really got to give it some room to breathe. So I personally don't mind what he's doing because I don't like take the space outside of the ICE facility. To me, like law and order, like you gotta buckle down on that. You can't have people throwing shit, breaking shit, throwing rocks. That's just a hard pass for me. So for him to go in and say, hey, we're cleaning this up. When I hear the numbers on Chicago.
Something real quick. So you said clean this up. So here's something I'd be curious about because you know a lot of numbers in terms of when 130%, debt to GDP ratio or 18 months is unsustainable, whatever. I'm curious, how many countries have survived after the head executive has started to weaponize the military against its own citizenry? Curious what the standard survival rate is on a country past that point, because what Trump is doing with the National Guard is something that I don't know, since the Civil War, I am not aware of any president ever abusing the National Guard in that way. They're not supposed to deploy to a state without the consent of the governor, and they're generally not supposed to do it in like times of great emergency with the governor requesting. So
it's interesting. Again, you and I look at the same thing and we see something different. So I don't view what he's doing as weaponizing the military against his own citizenry. That is definitely not what I read.
Okay, well, but so factually it just is. If a military person is turned for law enforcement purposes, that's the military against the citizen.
But if they're upholding the laws of the country,
they're not supposed to uphold the laws. That's not what the military is for. The military is to fight foreign enemies. Laws are upheld by, you can say federal law enforcement or state law enforcement or local law enforcement, but not the military.
So looking into the specifics of whether he's breaching the Constitution or not is a different question. But I will say, just like you feel like, listen, there's checks and balances that are going to keep Mamdani, even though he has the same murderous ideology that has killed and killed and killed, there are things that are going to stop him from being able to kill and kill and kill. I don't think Trump is going to use the military to coup the cities or anything like that. And if he does, that would be a huge alarm bell for me.
Even though he did try to do a coup before, and even though he has said that he intends to deploy the military against the wishes of people, and even though he is talking about extra security measures around polling stations that he's saying.
The way that I see, and I think you're referencing January 6th, the way that I see January 6th is something along the lines of, I'm not going to coup the government unless you're going to do it, right? One of those where it's like, he's not coming out and saying it. I've seen what that really looks like. Like if you look in history at people who are actually like, I'm here to coup the government, it looks dramatically different.
It looks about exactly the same. Hitler looked exactly the same.
No way.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
That is absolute madness. So this Hitler was amassing like private brown shirts, getting them to go and physically beat people up, not like...
So the biggest difference between Hitler and Trump, which is very unfortunate, is that Hitler had to be more intelligent and more subversive because Hitler didn't already have the support of the entire population. So where you reference brown shirts, Donald Trump is just deploying ICE agents and trying to fight with the Supreme Court that he can racially profile people, or he is deploying the National Guard to places saying that he's solving crime. Like anytime your head executive of your country is saying we're using the military for law enforcement, that's such an insanely scary idea. And when you're deploying, when Governor Newsom is speaking at some arena and for no reason Trump is just deploying federal agents all over this. Like this is one of the reasons why the Bill of Rights, why the Constitution was created. It's one of the reasons why we had the Articles of Confederation before our constitutional convention, is because states said, I'm not going to let a federal government send your shit in here and tell us how to do our stuff. And now as conservatives and maybe the country, a lot of people in the country are like, oh, well, if the military wants to do law enforcement, that should be a deeply unnerving thing. I just don't see much of a difference there in terms of Trump sending his people. Like he's tried to get more people to sign up for ICE. He's increased the budget of it like 10x. He's written executive orders to like try to facilitate more law enforcement joining, his military. So like people like the brown shirts eventually become things like the Gestapo or whatever, right? Like the SS. I mean, Trump just is already in government, is already president, has it. So I just don't see a significant difference there, I guess.
So when I look at that and reading Mein Kampf, seeing what his plan was, seeing how he enacted it, seeing how he would walk into a room with his thugs and be like, are you going to get on board? If they say no, he'd walk out and his thugs would just shoot him. So you may have a mental map that's the kind of person that Trump is. I do not share that mental map at all. And because I don't have that mental map of Trump, I can't make the jump to like, oh, this is the kind of thing. It's just going to keep escalating and escalating and escalating.
So when Trump says things about like deporting Mamdani, that doesn't sound like it's approaching that, because that's that's the one step off of like killing somebody is I'm going to deport you. I'm exiling you from my country because I don't like you politically.
Destiny, I like you a lot, but you will say the most unhinged shit. And I'll just be like, look, it's Destiny. You got to contextualize it. He's got a whole thing about you have to use this kind of bombastic rhetoric to get people's attention, but he's really a sensible guy. And so I am always quick to be like, I think I know who Destiny is as a person. Like, I'm going to like give space for that.
Okay.
I feel the same way about Trump.
Do you think that I would speak the exact same way if I was a president of the United States? There are ways that you talk to friends that I'm sure you would never talk to an employee like. There are ways
Here's how I've mapped you.
Okay.
You are extremely intelligent.
Sure.
You have many gears, and you will use the gear that's effective. If you saw that you needed to do one of your patented, I say unhinged in a fun, playful way. If you had to do one of your patented Destiny, no longer Stephen Bonnell, like Destiny unhinged rants because your base needed to know you were there, the thing that made them love you, that person's still in there, that you've not become some cuck politician, you would do it. And
so I guess I understand you saying that, but like there are things that like even in Mamdani's acceptance speech saying that like he's going to be mayor for all of New York and he's going to try to do whatever he can to do right by all of, New Yorkers or whatever. I'll say things like, I think MAGA's lost their fucking mind. I think half this country is insane. If I was an elected leader of people, especially if half my constituents were MAGA, I wouldn't say that, right? I think it's a little bizarre to look at my speech patterns and then say, well, as long as Trump is better than that, like we occupy totally different lanes.
Trump is better than that.
I say a lot of unhinged stuff, but my role is entertainer, activist, like political pundit at most. Like that's the lane that I'm in. If I was doing advocacy for a particular cause, if I was an elected politician or leader, like my tone would change significantly to match the new role. Like,
sure, I get that. But if Trump doesn't view the world that way and is therefore violating the ethos that you have, this is an idea that's helped me a lot. If you look at the way somebody behaves and go, what would it mean if I did that? And then you're like, holy shit, that would be so crazy. You have to look at them and go, what does it mean when they do that? So and this is where we just read Trump differently. And I know I'm totally, if he ends up being a maniac, then I was just wrong and I could not read this guy and I made catastrophic
I understand
errors.
you say that, but he has done all the things.
I think you're misreading it. I think the view of amplitude that you have is way off the fucking mark. So him sending in troops, that's not a big deal. To me, not at all.
Do you think him playing games with...
He sent them to LA. Sure. What's different in LA? Literally nothing.
And no other president has found the need to do this, to function this way.
No, we're not. This is the first time we've been in a populist moment in modern history. So,
and then the second thing is, or another thing is, what about playing games with FEMA funds? Telling some states that if you don't follow me politically, I'm not going to make FEMA funds about it. He was saying he was going to pull federal funding from
Trump
New York.
Will weaponize anything and everything that he thinks he can get away with.
Sure. So that's the thing he'll do, right?
Yeah.
But you just said weaponize anything and everything he can get away with. So why not deport Mamdani if he could?
Yeah. Would I be surprised if he actually deported Mamdani? Yes, I would be.
Why?
But I think
if I'm looking for leadership on this, I would look at Rubio and the State Department. I would look at the fact that they abolished all of USAID without any input from Congress. And I would look at the fact that they are selectively deporting visa holders based on their position on Israel-Palestine. That seems to be that maps on pretty cleanly.
So you look at that and feel like, whoa, we've gone full Gestapo.
Yeah, he's taking the First Amendment rights away from visa holders for issues that he thinks are politically expedient and then deporting people as a result of that. That's like way beyond any American pale that I think that like it's so far gone. That's crazy at that point.
Look, if he's violating due process in a way that I'm unaware of, yeah, bad.
Okay. Suing pollsters because he doesn't like the polls that they do, or suing the media companies, the FCC pressure to get Jimmy Kimmel out.
This is where we get into the dirty tricks. First of all, Jimmy Kimmel went back, so I don't think
he did come back after a huge public outcry. There was pressure by the FCC to have him fired, and then a threat to pull licenses from all the underlying companies if they didn't.
Right, but do you think that that's unique to him? Do you think that... Interesting. That does not match the reality that I live in.
There's no example you can give on the Democrat side of anything remotely like that.
So when you look at all of the information on the Russia hoax, to you, not a hoax. Russia really was involved. That was all above board.
1,000,000% of course.
To do. Okay, so then...
But I've read all the underlying documents.
Yeah,
I've read the Mueller report. I've read it's all... Not only is it true, it's worse than most people even...
So your map is... Democrats, honorable. Republicans, Trump especially, unhinged liars who will do whatever to amass more power.
100%, yeah.
Okay. Not my read in the slightest.
Okay.
So
and then I'll just say that a year ago, I made a bunch of predictions. I feel like, go ahead, yeah.
Was Biden cognitively capable of being president?
I think absolutely. I never saw any evidence that he wasn't.
Then we we look at the same thing and we see something different.
Sure.
And
if I were to point to an example, if I were to ask you, did Biden need his executive orders explained to him when they were brought? You couldn't find a single video of that happening.
I have to imagine Biden wouldn't be able to take his own medication without somebody explaining it to
Sure,
him.
you can say that. But the difference is that Trump has already lied about his medical history. Do you acknowledge that? That his doctor has lied as well?
I don't know, but would not be
surprised. He has the chronic venous issue.
Would not be surprised.
Okay, so he did. He lied about his medical history. Biden never lied about his medical history that we can see.
Then he doesn't know it or something. The man had dementia, whether it was Alzheimer's or not, I don't know. But like,
you can say that, but you have no evidence for that.
Yes, I do.
What?
I trust my eyes because of the fact that inside of their own government in administration, they had a group that referred to themselves as the Politburo, which, as you well know, is the group in a communist country that runs the country. So to me, like, and again, this is a what are my sensitivities versus what are yours? I am totally freaked out by communism, socialism.
Okay, so let's get away from the random reports of Politburo. What was how did that come out in a policy manner? What is our external evidence of like?
It is my map of the situation that you did not, for some number of years or some percentage of the time, that Biden was not actively the one running the country.
Because I don't have any evidence of that. Whereas today I can say, so like, for instance, here's the thing. We just saw Trump admit that he had no idea, I guess, that he pardoned the Binance guy or whatever.
He didn't say he didn't know that he pardoned him. He said he didn't know who he was.
So who pardoned him?
This guy's telling me who I trust. You should pardon this guy because this is all bullshit. This is Biden going after these guys. Yeah, Biden going after anybody in crypto. Cool.
So what you've just described is there's somebody else running the government besides Trump.
No, I think look, even as a CEO, it's not that you're not running the company. It's that you trust certain people to have a sense of like what's going on. They're going to bring it to you, get you to weigh in. But I'm saying if they're not bringing it to him, if they're not getting him to weigh in, that he's just completely checked out because he can hardly talk and hold a thought in his head, that's a very different thing than you're running an entire country. You've got all these international
deals. So who's
deals.
telling Trump who to pardon?
I don't know who that person
That's supposed to be the power exclusively granted to the president.
Yeah. So they bring it to him. They make the argument. And he says, I'm here for it. Whoever the person was that came to him.
Who is that?
But if
it doesn't bother you, don't even know who that is?
Yeah. It's a knowable name, right?
No, it's not. We don't know who's
so
giving
you're
these
saying
things.
they're going to like keep that under shroud.
I'm saying that the weird stuff that you're worried about under Biden, that we have no evidence of it ever happening, we see it happening right now on TV with Trump, but for some reason you're not perceiving that. Trump is pardoning people and he doesn't know anything about them and he can't answer questions about them. There are politicians being killed in this country. It happened to the 2 Minnesota lawmakers. He didn't know anything about it sometimes, even though he did 6 months earlier. He told Walls, I'm not calling that guy, he's a whack. Yeah.
You give such a pass to Biden in a way that I cannot reconcile.
Because I'm trying to, tell me what is the evidence of Biden being senile that doesn't involve him being a shitty debater?
Put the clips on. He literally can't speak at times.
So besides him being a bad speaker.
No. It's not being a bad speaker. That is cognitive decline.
So you have no examples besides him being. If we were to compare,
this is so weird.
Well, I'm curious. If we were to compare Biden's
years.
State of the Union to Trump's State of the Union, which one do you think sounded more coherent?
I mean, with Trump, for sure, far and away.
Absolutely not. I totally disagree. Trump not only so for instance, Biden was able to deliver his State of the Union while I think Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene were standing up and screaming at him in Congress. He had a comeback for him and he continued on. When Trump had any people making noise, Mike Johnson started saying he was going to throw people out of Congress because he couldn't deal with it. Trump repeats the same 5 talking points over and over again, right? Well, the difference is like, you can say, well, just look and see. And I can give you example after example. How many illegal immigrants came into this country? It started at 10 million under Biden. Then it was 15, 20. The last I heard from Trump, it was 25 million came in. I don't know what the actual number is. I see that he's lied about his health. That seems to be the case. He just got an MRI recently. We don't know what it was for. They're not releasing the evidence there.
Let's go one by one because wall of facts,
sure, it's admittedly
is a very impressive technique that you use.
Sure.
But if you take them one by one, should we have opened the border?
Should we have opened the border?
Yeah, just open borders, let people in.
No, but we never had open borders.
Really?
Correct.
So should we have treated the borders the way that we did? Like you just hung up on the word open?
Well, yeah, because open implies some like...
Did we do a good thing over Biden's term in terms of it positively impacting America? with the borders.
We could have had better border enforcement, I think. There were a lot of other issues going on in the country at the time.
But are you worried that I'm like going to got you there? I'm trying to build a mental model of what you believe.
Well, the conversation is, how do we think who is senile versus the other person?
Yeah, but remember, so you and I are probably involved in a very different conversation right now. So
I'm just thinking in terms of senility, in terms of mental faculty.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at mental faculty, so one at a time. So very first thing, I've never seen somebody have to explain an executive order to Biden. Every single one that Trump signs is explained to him. And oftentimes it looks like he doesn't even know what, he's like, oh, this sounds like a good idea. And then he signs
Okay, so on that, what I see is somebody who, we've had all these policy discussions. I know what they're going to end up being. When you present them to me, just remind me which one this is. And then, yep, cool, got it. This is not somebody who's like, I have no idea what's going on and I'm befuddled.
Okay.
Like that is, now that may be your read, but that definitely is not my read. Like that seems so like blasé. Yeah, got it. Like there's so many things, so many moving parts.
So what are the moving, okay, so then the second thing, Trump said he was going to Russia instead of Alaska to go and talk to Putin. What are the gaps for Biden here in terms of mixing up even like the places he's visiting?
Does that, like if he said I'm going to Azerbaijan to meet with Putin, that might be a little bit weird. But if you say the country name of the person, the number of times I see people point out gaffes that Trump made that I'm like, God damn, I could see myself doing the same thing. And I'm not in cognitive decline. So that one like just doesn't feel like a big gotcha. Like
tries to argue with Zelensky, you got invaded in 2015 instead of 2014. I don't know why he tried to argue that point.
Yeah, but now you're doing the thing my wife does where you think you're average and everybody else is dumb. Like your mind remembers facts in a way that the average person just is never going
Trump shouldn't
to
be the average
facts.
person. He's the president
I
of the
get
United
it, but he's
States.
going to be good at different things. So he obviously knows how to aggregate people around him to get into power. He was, should have been an invisible real estate developer in New York that nobody ever knows about, but has been able to make himself absolutely the most famous person on planet Earth. You can hate that all you want, but it is.
I don't hate it. So I acknowledge you won a popularity contest. I got that. Okay.
Cool. So unfortunately, as you said at the beginning of the interview, that's really what today is about. We live in that age.
But you could be senile and be popular.
I think it is important for each of us to understand that we look at the same thing and we walk away with a different read on it. Okay. And then we can explain why we think that. Like I have tremendous fears of the distortions that happen on the pathology that happens on the left. I'm far more afraid of that. And when I look at Trump, even though I am afraid of the pathology on the right, I don't see Trump as having enough of the amplitude of those types of things, having looked as closely as I've looked at Hitler specifically. I just do not see the amplitude. I get where people see like there are similarities here, but the amplitude is just so far off from me. So then I'm like, I don't really have big concerns there. Now I totally get it. One, I know I could be wrong, and so I don't overtrust myself, and I'm not screaming to the world, hey, this guy's amazing, we got to keep him in power. That is not my take. But that, like, if anybody's just trying to understand me, not necessarily convince me, but understand me, it's like over here on the left, because I've spent so much time reading about how we end up over here trying to do these things out of what I will say is resentment, not a desire to help the poor, but resentment. I understand the mechanisms of how the economy breaks when you do those things. So I'm looking at it going, this is never going to work. And so even if we all say, we can ignore Tom when he says something about Trump, but let's listen over here. And maybe we say, we can, Destiny, when he sounds an alarm on the right, you need to listen. He is super attuned. He's got some blind spots to people on the left just because maybe he gets it more or whatever. Hey, I'm fine with that. I'm not expecting people to just listen and do what I say.
I understand where you're coming from. I guess my thing is that I've heard the klaxon sounding about socialism and communism for 30 years for the Democrats, and I have yet to ever see like even a step really in that direction.
Okay,
and then
let's address
Trump,
that.
Yeah, we've like so far in that I'm like, holy shit, like there's so much
This is really enlightening. Okay. So let me tell you what that sounds like from my perspective.
Okay.
I'm looking at it and I'm like, over the last 40 years, we have gone so far with left policies, lunatic left policies, unfortunately, both from the right and the left, but they've both been running big government, big spending, deficits are fine.
Why are these left instead of, these are just fiscal things? It depends on where you're spending it, whether it's left or right, right?
I'm going with traditional definitions.
Even traditionally, so like Republicans used to be way more hawkish, right? So the big spending there is going to be
I would define small government by Republican. Like Republicans want small government. Small government to me means that there are just fewer costs.
What about Iraq and Afghanistan?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Sure.
The last 40 years, remember, I'm not a Republican.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I'm a Democrat.
I'm just saying it's weird to say
when
like
I look at these two, they have both become completely irresponsible.
Sure. I'm just saying when you say...
Hold on, because you gave me a very specific thing that you're saying, and I'm trying to explain how it sounds to me.
Okay, sure.
And what I'm saying is you say we haven't moved any to the left. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? In the same way that when I go, what do you mean this is not crazy? Like taking the National Guard into LA, what's the problem, bro? And you're like, are you fucking out of your mind? Like that seems so obvious to you. You're like, can I even take this person seriously if they don't see this? That's how I feel about people who are not afraid of what's happening on the left.
I don't know, wait, real quick. I understand what you're saying. No, wait, I know. It's a real thing, okay?
Go ahead.
I'm not disagreeing with you that it's bad. I just feel like we're having a weird, almost no true Scotsmanish fallacy where we're saying that like, here are bad left-wing things and one is big government spending. And I'm saying big government spending isn't always a left-wing thing. Pursuing a lot of wars, you could argue, is a right-wing thing, depending on what you're looking at. But the government can spend a lot of money, doesn't necessarily make it a left-wing thing. If we're going to define it that way, then we've almost like, through definitions, just won our arguments. And then both parties are basically left-wing party. Or actually, the Republican would be even more left-wing than the Democrat because they spent more than the Democrats.
I have a belief. Okay. Hey, if this ends up being wrong, then cool. I have a belief that the modern left, no matter what, they will keep funding entitlements, making them bigger. Because I believe that about the left, then I'm just like, yeah, this is never going to work. At least the right now pays lip service to trying to grow their way out of this. Now, the good or bad news is that is the only option. We collectively, left, right, everybody, center, everybody has let this get to the point where growth is the only option. Nothing else is going to work.
Okay.
So now we've got one guy who's at least paying lip service to it, who's at least trying some things. They're probably crazy and they probably won't work, but he's at least trying. And so for me, as one guy, I'm just like, I am far more comfortable with that than I am with the way that the left is approaching the situation, which is we've got to take care of everybody. We let the borders be wide open. And we want, when a horrific bill is passed, we're going to get our Red Bull no matter what. And I'm just like, I can't do it.
Okay. And the horrific bill was a Republican bill by a Republican Congress and a Republican president. And Republicans have been spending more than Democrats and lead the spending and have worse economies and cause contracting economies more than growing economies. And the last budget surplus we had was under a Democratic president. All the facts just seem to lay out like very clearly and cleanly. That
the last time that the average person's wages grew were under Trump. He's at least trying to do something on the world stage to get us back where we are not literally just handing our future to China.
By making enemies of every country on the planet?
Yeah, dude, look, again, I'm not going to bat for Trump.
You said he's trying to make everybody like us again, but it's not. They'll hate us now.
When I run the experiment of there's a reason you're making sounds. And the reason you're making sounds is you're trying to convince me of a thing. And so then I go, what thing is he trying to convince me of? And I keep coming back to that the next time that a Republican and Democrat go head to head, I should be wise enough to vote for the Democrat. And for me, what I'm saying is that will come down entirely to the person. So I have no problem voting for a Democrat. My beef is that if I hear economically just disqualifying words come out of somebody's mouth, it's going to be a hard pass. And so we can all say, it's a trigger that he hasn't. I think it's completely justified.
I actually 100% agree with you. But in that case, Trump has said so many more obviously disqualifying things than the Democrats.
That's interesting. I totally disagree.
For instance, most Republicans right now don't even acknowledge that a tariff is an import tax. Trump still won't acknowledge that.
As far as I can tell, the entire left tried to shut down crypto, which is
but that didn't happen.
Suicide. It did.
It literally did not. We had 4 years of Biden. It wasn't shut down.
I got sued by the US government because I was involved in crypto. I'm telling you right now, they were trying to chill that the fuck out. I've heard you make the same pitch about, when you've got Elon Musk coming after you, like if it were anybody but me, this is the kind of thing that has a chilling effect. It's exactly what it does. It's like, what? Like crypto is a legitimate thing. In fact, it is the only thing that's going to give people a life raft out of the absolute horrific mess that we are in from the dollar. Like you have
right
to have
now,
a way
the
for
president
people
of the
to
United
exit
States is
out,
running the largest crypto scam in
which
all
is
of human history.
Horrific.
Okay,
Dude,
all right.
But if you're talking about where do you balance all this out? I've got one person over here that's telling me you just shouldn't even be able to do this. Let's make sure that we're doing CBDCs. And then you've got a guy over here that is fucking Wild Westing it, making it like just the easiest thing in the world to bribe him, which is god awful. But at least he's trying to make America the innovation home for crypto, which when you know that growing is the only way to get out of this, somebody has to lengthen the runway on US treasuries. And the best idea that I've seen, it may not be the best, but the best idea I've seen is to create a one-to-one backed stablecoin with treasuries. And if you do that, you create instantly an international market for US treasuries. It will not stop the problem, but it will buy us more time for people to figure out what they're going to do.
Isn't there already an international market for US treasuries?
No, because people can't get... right now, if you tried to get into international treasuries, you already have to be in a government where you have access to that. So that already rules out God knows how.
Wait, private investors can buy treasury bonds?
Yeah, we're not worried about those. We're talking about the average guy in fucking Kenya that has a cell phone and that's it. He's got a governmental currency that's terrible. And so he can't save money in that. He would be way better off in US dollars. He would be way better off buying US treasuries, but he has no mechanism with which to do that. He doesn't even have a bank account. So many people worldwide would suddenly be able to get access, partly because it will allow people to innovate and create things like stablecoins that they make available wherever. And as long as you have something that can be audited and you have a one-to-one backed with the stablecoin, you are still going to get inflated. So people need to be aware of that. But the inflating USD is far better than virtually any currency on earth right now. So people all over the world would be like, oh my God, there's now all of a sudden there's massive appetite for whatever appetite there is for the digital currency. There will suddenly be an appetite for the treasury.
How do you buy, who's doing the currency conversion if you're buying a stable coin? So like, let's say somebody in Kenya wants to buy a stable coin in the United States. Is this being held like on a US owned treasury?
The mechanism by how that would work, it would certainly be, one would assume, the initial crop are going to be American companies that are they're domiciled here. They know all the regulations. They build the stable coin. It's all backed one-to-one with treasuries. And now they make it available for whatever. They make it available as a phone company. They make it available as a farming consortium, whatever. I mean, there will be untold amounts of innovation once there's clear regulation and people know what they can do.
Okay. I don't know if that would work in practice, but okay.
I obviously feel very strongly that will, and that we have to have some ideas around how do we move forward with elongating the runway so that people can migrate off of the dollar in an orderly fashion.
Okay.
Because if that happened fast, that would make 2008 look like a trip to the bank. Like it would be catastrophic.
So the U.S. government would just have no more control over the currency then, or?
The U.S. government, if it defaults on its loans, will not be able to get loans.
The U.S. government should never default technically, right? Because they can always produce more money.
You just hyperinflate your currency.
Sure.
So at some point you go, either we hyperinflate and nothing matters, or we recognize we have to default. Both are catastrophic. So pick whichever one you want.
Okay.
I heard you say in a recent stream that you're putting yourself in this crazy position in terms of you've now really become a target, but you're doing it because you actually want to make things better in America. So what is that vision of America that you have in your head that would be better?
Civility has to come back on the right, and they have no reason to bring it back, and they've benefited too much from being uncivil for so many decades. And so there has to be a recognition that you can't be civil with an uncivil side, because it's an evolutionary trap where they can just indefinitely take advantage of you. It's like the thing I've leaned in a lot to is like the tit for tat strategies or whatever that, dictate how two sides can treat each other.
Okay, so I've heard you talk about that before. The tit for tat strategy, though, they found that there was one strategy that beat tit for tat.
It's called tit for tat with like 10% forgiveness or something. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're at like 10,000% forgiveness right now.
So to you, it's just, that's never going to work.
it definitionally doesn't work. And we've seen the Republicans take advantage over and over again of the environments we live in. They're pushing the boundaries on everything so much. I guess we disagree on the magnitude of that, but I mean, I would factually just point to things that the Trump administration is doing that have never been done in all of, or at least in any recent U.S. history. And I would say that like the problem is that Republicans feel, one, I only have to argue with people on the left or center about this because on the right, the Republicans understand this because they say the exact same things I do when they're talking to the right or independents, and they know what I'm saying is true, and they give that advice to their side. But then they come and they hand wring on our side, and for some reason, liberals seem to agree with their hand wringing. But basically, if one side is led to believe that there will never be accountability for their actions, then they have no incentive not to be acting in the most unaccountable way possible. And I think that that's where the Republican Party has been at for a majority of my lifetime.
And do you think that if you, well, one, how do you plan to make that contribution? So if you are going to attempt to get the right to dial back the rhetoric, what's the strategy?
Reframing and just making people understand the problem that's happening, I think, is the first big thing. Because I think somehow the conservatives have gotten a hold on like every part of the media apparatus. On the right-wing channels, they can just lie with absolute impunity and with no shame. And then on the left-wing channels, you're stuck talking about the lies on the right wing. And, you know, the analogy I use is when you're on defense, you're never gaining ground. At most, you defend your territory and that's it. And I think more people need to be aware that the right has managed to dictate the talking points everywhere. And it's an unwinnable fight, basically.
Why are they able to dictate the talking points?
Because I think the left is concerned with standards and governance and the right is not. So there'll be an impetulant child and they'll scream and they'll kick and cry and they'll beg the Democrats to come and save them, like they're doing now, begging them to turn back on the government because for some reason we've had two of the longest shutdowns in U.S. history under a Republican president with a Republican Congress. Or like when they lost their majority speaker seat and they were begging Pelosi, can you guys like vote for not McCarthy, but whatever the next guy was, please, because we lost our majority speaker seat somehow for the first time in U.S. history. They just don't care about governing.
But, okay, so you're just saying the drama of acting like a petulant child just controls the news cycle?
Basically, yeah. So they can lie with impunity about things. Everybody's stuck trying to talk about it or defend it. Then because they don't care about governing. So for instance, right now, Mike Johnson is just totally happy dismissing Congress, not bringing anybody new in to avoid the Epstein file shit, to avoid governing. They don't care. The government shutdowns, they don't care. Trump's not talking about like opening the government again. As long as he feels like he can get away with it politically, he's totally happy to keep it going indefinitely. So if they're not concerned with governance, then they're just going to kick up whatever talking points they can. And then the left, for whatever reason, feels like they have to respond to those talking points. And then they're stuck in this weird trap of saying, like, we don't want to give $1.5 trillion to illegal immigrants for healthcare. Like, that's not even a real thing. Like, it's a thing they say. But it's because they're not held accountable on any media platform. They can just lie and then walk away and nobody really says anything about it.
Okay, that seems to say more about the public than it says about them, or it says more about algorithms. Mm-hmm. So you've obviously become very popular. You don't let people get away with lies. So from that perspective, why do you think the contagion of your content isn't larger? I'm not sure the right way to ask that question. But if you're already doing the thing, mm-hmm. which is you control the discourse, you talk about what you want to talk about, you're obviously very good at it. You get invited on the biggest shows, you get on big stages. What does it tell you about the broad audience that doesn't, I guess, catch more fire?
Well, for the right, it's incredibly unpopular. Once I became more aware of these patterns, I didn't talk to any more large right-wing figures because I wasn't willing to play the same game, mm-hmm. because they're not looking for actual critical pushback or challenges. They're looking for more performative stuff. Even Joe Rogan is too scared to invite Gavin Newsom onto his show, despite the fact that he'll shit talk California and Gavin Newsom constantly. He's too afraid to have the conversation. When the right wing sees legitimate criticism or challenge, they avoid it like the plague. And then their own fan bases, I think, are deluded into thinking they are accepting challengers.
I think I have to ask a follow-up question. I'm so sorry
to interrupt. You want.
So you're saying that the right controls the talking points, and that's what makes the left sort of always just playing defense.
Yeah.
But why, if the right is able to control the narrative by being a petulant child, and we're just saying basically drama gets clicks, are you saying that the left is up against a fundamental part of just the human experience, that the left and the right both crave drama, and so the left and the right both watch right figures throw tantrums?
Well, the left is still trying to keep the country working is the issue. And if the
not the political chattering class, like they should still be able to get cycles, or are you saying the only cycles that matter are the government officials themselves?
Well, there's two separate things. So like when Biden came in, Biden tried to govern the country. He said he was going to be a president for both people. He wasn't on Twitter all the time firing off crazy things. He passed a historic amount of joint legislation, some of which Trump tried and failed to pass. Like, Biden came in to govern the country, and Trump came back to tell lies and to make a mockery of everything. And after we get through whatever we get through here, whatever this disaster is, we're going to have to bring in Democrats again to govern the country. If Democrats want to play the same game Republicans are, they basically would have to give up in governing and say, okay, fine, I guess we're just going to sink the ship with both of us now, and we're not going to keep us afloat anymore. So because Democrats are trying to actually govern, they're playing like a game where they're trying to practice like policy and play politics at the same time. And MAGA has abandoned policy and they're just playing politics, and it's kind of impossible to win that game.
So when you say policy, because I look at what's going on with Trump and I see the most active president in terms of trying to shape America that I've ever seen in my life. But because he's doing it by fiat,
By illegally, yes.
that's where you're like, this isn't governance, this is some bullshit.
No, it's authoritarianism or dictatorship.
But you're saying like, so policy is specifically, you want to see them engage with Congress,
Like
getting
real
laws
lasting
passed.
policy. Like Trump's tariffs, the next president could just get rid of them like that.
Right.
And I think the Supreme Court, I think, is hearing arguments on it now. I think the Republican
today.
Senate just voted to rescind them finally. Like, okay, maybe the president shouldn't be able to unilaterally dictate economic
Bad news
policy.
is he can veto it.
Yeah, I think that both sides have to come back to wanting to govern the country. It can't constantly be, I would argue, Democrats picking up the pieces from horrible Republican governance over and over again. The population needs to be better convinced that Republicans can't govern, and they've refused to govern. And we're in the middle of another record-breaking shutdown right now because of their refusal or inability to govern. And like, once the Republican Party has come back to being willing to govern, then we can have better conversations on policy, and we can go back to...
Do you think in policy, or do you think in like the cultural battle of it all? Like when you think about your contribution, is your contribution almost aimed at the audience? And you're like, listen, this is how we should be thinking through this.
My contribution is aimed at the audience. I'm not like
Got it.
I'm not part of a think tank. I can't like suggest policy to congressmen. Yeah.
Very interesting. Understood. Okay, so do you think like would you most like to reach the right, or do you think that that they piss me off so much I'm never going to be able to speak to them? I think that's sort of a lost cause. So it's like I've got to speak to the left, tell them how to metabolize
So in the
right's
past,
behavior.
I think I have a gift for being able to speak to both sides. If I'm trying to do this very effectively, and I did that for a while, but about a year ago, I guess I felt like I identified that the left just doesn't have very many strong voices that are advocating for itself. And that especially now, as I've seen the second No Kings protest come up, I think there is a huge group of center-left people in the United States to just feel unrepresented and unheard. And then especially when I look at the success of Gavin Newsom, just got Prop 50 passed, I'm like, okay, well, these are like, we need more strong, hey, this is a center-left person that's not just trying endlessly to understand and be compassionate to an unhinged right that's taking us further and further off the cliff. Like, there are things that we should stand for on the left. There are policies that we should fight for, and we can be proud and fight for those things without having to constantly capitulate or be, understanding of people that are, in our mind, trying to destroy the country.
Now, those you don't have a specific thing in your mind. It's just I want to make sure that
What do you mean by specific thing in mind?
Well, so I said, what policies do you want to see go forward? You're like, look, I'm not a think tank. I'm speaking more to the audience. But if there are policies that you feel like you're fighting for.
For policies, I mean, in general, like I said, I don't even have policy debate anymore, but for policies, like basically a realistic assessment of the world that leads to greater levels of financial and economic integration with the world. So we should be the heads of all these multilateral trade agreements instead of retreating from trade with other countries. We need to understand that there are incredibly powerful incentives to have trade deficits, and we benefited from that for a long time for reasons that people don't seem to understand. And
because you want to essentially create a market for US dollars?
Kind of. It keeps our interest low, basically, on our debt. And it allows us to fund our debt without having exorbitantly high interest rates. Because a lot of people are holding USD, and that USD makes its way back to the United States in the form of buying treasury bonds. That's why, despite everything Trump tried to do with the tariffs and everything else, when the inversion happened on the treasury yield curve and the yield started to go up, it was because people were losing faith in the U.S. economy. It's good sometimes to have a lot of USD out there in the world because investing in U.S. Treasury is a very good investment and helps keep our interest down.
Do you think globalism was a mistake, or is that something you want to see us get back to a sensible version of?
No, I think it's crazy. I think it's very hard to say globalism was a mistake. But I mean, there are always like ways that you can augment your policy to make it better, right? Like if I had like a family member that died from a car accident, I don't think I would say, well, cars were a mistake. I would say, well, there's things we can do better with cars. There's things that we can do better with an integrated world. So,
do you think that the world moves through phases where there's a time where globalism is going to work well, and then there's populist moments, like I would put forth, we're in a populist moment right now, and in a populist moment, you're always going to be protectionist. That there's, my read is that humans move in cycles, and when you're in a populist cycle, you're always going to be protectionist. Like the two will always go together. Or do you see a way, even in a moment like this, there's a way to break out of that, and it looks like?
Yeah, and that you have to take on like leadership roles there to break out of those moments. Like to become scared and locked down and protectionist in times of uncertainty, I think just furthers the cycle, and it further entrenches you into the cycle. And I don't think it's usually producing the best outcome. Like I think America being a leader in the world in leading the way and trying to accomplish certain things, whether post 91 or whatever, it's like leading with NATO but not taking over all of Eastern Europe and everything because Russia's gone or the Soviet Union's gone. Whether that means like making foreign direct investment in China or other countries that we might have traditionally seen as not being in our interest, and then expanding our own markets as a result of that. Like there are ways to be leaders in these things. I don't know historically, unless I'm missing something, where the populist movement was healthy for the state of the country. I feel like generally these lead to bad outcomes. That populism always seems like a thing that has a phase, and then once people realize like, oh wait, I remember why this doesn't work, then you go back to the other thing, like actually working. I feel like that plays out over and over again. We're seeing it happen kind of in Argentina now. For some reason, we're doing massive currency swaps with them because, well, I know why. It's because Bilyeu or whatever said nice things about Trump. Yeah, I would like to see that, like a big, bold America that's like taking aggressive steps in the world to cement its place in the world instead of being like a very scared child, I guess.
Okay, so as somebody who speaks to the audience, what is it that they're getting wrong that's led us into a populist moment? How do you talk somebody out of a populist moment?
The most important thing that I think a lot of people misunderstand about the world, is especially true of economics, is people seem to think that everything is a zero-sum game. So if I work at Walmart and I earn $50 and then I go to Walmart and I buy something for $50, people think that like, oh, nothing happened. Like there's always the joke of like, oh, an economist might say there was $100 of GDP, but in reality, nothing has really happened. But that's not actually true. Like trade is, generally speaking, as long as it's voluntary, trade is always mutually beneficial. If I'm giving you $20 for something and you're giving me something else, what I'm telling you is that your thing that you're giving me is worth more than my $20. And what you're telling me is the $20 I'm getting from you is worth more to me than the thing, right? This is like time investment for money and everything else, right? Capital investment, this all works this way, personally. So like getting people to understand that right now, the biggest issue with the right and MAGA is that like if we have a trade deficit, that means they're winning, we're losing. Or if immigrants are coming to the country, it means they're coming here to win and we're losing. Or if we have H-1B workers, it's because they're winning and we're losing. Or if universities are doing well, then the middle class, upper class is winning, and the working class is losing. That idea that you have to fuck over everybody, like the crab, keeping people from climbing out, I just think is incredibly corrosive to a positive environment where we can all grow.
So on immigration, which may be one of the most, when people get into a populist moment, they become very protectionist around that. What do you think about that? What's the right way to handle it for specifically America?
I think that you should look, one is we need to come together and have an honest conversation about what our goals are with immigration, which I'm saying because parts of the country have ejected themselves from real talk. We can't even have that conversation. Do we want immigrants from everywhere? Some people think we only want high-skilled immigrants. All immigrants are good. Low-skilled wages or low-skilled labor is also like incredibly important to keep the economy running in different areas. So do we want immigrants?
Really fast, let me ask the obvious question. Mm-hmm. Is an immigrant good if they don't contribute positively to the economy, but they do take public funds?
No, but that's almost impossible. Almost every person will be a GDP benefit. They might be a fiscal drain, depending on. So like they might take more.
Spend that money.
Yeah, because it's always spent and circulating through the economy, right? But so it's up to us to figure out like, well, what is the balance? How much can we take on? How much can we afford? And then what are our goals, right? And our goals should be to grow the economy, to grow the country for everybody, right? Yeah. And to adhere to some like core principle set of American values, whatever we define those as.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. So does assimilation matter? Do you think that's a part of what's playing out right now?
Yeah, I think assimilation is really important, but it's weird because people talk about assimilation, but they haven't identified what those core American values are.
If somebody could give you a list, would the list be enough? Or it's like, no, listen, it's got to be something like, because like I have a list. So freedom. I'll say liberty as a principle, capitalism, and the rounded to a growth mindset that work hard, work your way up, get better at something, contribute. Individualistic in nature, vaguely Christian ethics in the background.
Sure.
By that, I mean very specifically a spark of the divine in the individual that creates the right of sovereignty.
Okay, sure.
Now, does that feel roughly American to you?
Broadly speaking, yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
I think the way I would conceptualize it, I'm going to use different words, it's probably the same thing, but like in a very, very basic sense, the liberal paradise is the idea that all of us can come from different ideologies and different moral codes and different ways of life, but we can come together and in some ways agree on some shared, for some things we'll say laws, right? Like even if I think that adultery is wrong, and you might think adultery is okay, we both agree that murder should be illegal, right? So there's room for people to have different beliefs and ideas. They might go to their own churches, but there's also room where we come together and we say, but for all of us to function together, we have to agree on some things. And protecting people's ability to basically pursue one of the things I wish I could remember who this quote was from. There's a guy who said something along the lines of like, my favorite thing about the United States of America is the US of A allows you to become the best version of yourself more than any other country does. And the idea of being able to go to the United States and to pursue that as well as you can while sustaining the overall general health of the country. Like these are very broad words, and you can get into the debate on what that looks like exactly, which is part of the country, is being able to debate what exactly that looks like. I would say broadly speaking, that's like what the country should be about, yeah.
Okay. How do you get people onto that? Like when you're talking to the audience, is it going to be stat-based? Look at how immigrants have worked, or this is how we should assimilate, or how do you, like when I look out at the world and I see the people that are having the biggest impact on galvanizing people around values, I unfortunately see things like Nick Fuentes, he speaks very clearly, but I, as a single person, am mortified.
I mean, it depends on who you're speaking to, and it depends on where you're speaking. Like if I was invited to like an economic forum to debate, an economist on the fiscal pros and cons of immigration, then we're going to be having a numbers conversation about what types of immigrants contribute more to our budget, I guess, right? If I'm talking to like a Nick Fuentes type person, then it's going to be a broader concept on like, what is the character of our nation? How have we gotten to where we are today? Has immigration benefited us or hurt us? In what ways has it benefited and hurt us? And then going forward, how can we continue to capitalize on, assuming we agree that America is a great nation, how do we continue to benefit from the ways that we viewed immigrants in the past and protect from maybe some of the negatives that we've suffered as other people have come here too?
Can I give you my darkest fear? And then I'll be very interested to see if your natural response is to be like, yeah, or if you will be able to talk me off a ledge.
Okay.
It is my experience that all adults can change and only 2% will. So every time that I yell into the void, I am trying to find that 2% that will actually change. But for the most part, all humans are automata. But some get a high roll on changeability. Others get a very low roll on changeability. I think all kids are very changeable, but adults not so much. And so it does get a little disheartening sometimes to think, wow, like I'm really only speaking to 2% of people.
I think that my personal belief is your major personality traits are pretty locked in by the time you're like 15. I think it's very hard to almost impossible to like fundamentally change people. But I think that fundamentally, like we're like 99% the same. I think the thing that happens is our intuitions get hijacked and moved in different directions because of politics or groupthink or whatever else. And I think those things can change.
Meaning if you can get some sort of tipping point to happen in that group, then most people will just follow the group.
Yeah, or if you can just get people to realize a thing, then they'll be like, oh, okay. They don't really have to fundamentally change. It just, an outer perimeter thing changes. And then they're like, okay, well, this still comports with the thing that I feel is important.
It's a very interesting insight. And I think that you're absolutely right that once the herd moves, then the herd moves. And so it just becomes a question of how do we move the herd?
Unfortunately, a lot of things, and I hate this. You said I'm very smart. I consider myself to be quite smart. And even I would say for myself, I've just had to learn a lot through experience. And I don't think there's a shortcut for that ever. I think a really you can go on almost anything, racism or whatever. Guns, right? For a lot of very far left-leaning people, guns are scary, and they might think that they would even take the principled position of like, guns are bad, I don't want anything to do with them, right? But it's probably not their position. It's more the concept of what they think guns are is bad. And even though that seems similar, there's a world where you take a leftist friend, like, okay, well, let's go shooting. Like, go to the range, have some fun. You can see the people there are chill. We're chill. We have some fun shooting. When you come away from that experience, it feels like I fundamentally changed from thinking guns are bad to thinking that guns are good. That's not really what's happened. What's happened is your thought was never guns are bad. It's guns are bad because they're like murder, scary weapons that are uncontrollable, to guns are actually okay because they're not murder, scary weapons that are uncontrollable, right? And then you can make the same experiential argument, I think, for a lot of different things.
Speaking of guns, you've become arguably the most prominent voice on the left, certainly the most bombastic, that's going to get the biggest response. When you go now into public, given what's going on, do you worry that you've become a legitimate target?
I mean, a little bit. I think I still have the young man's energy of thinking he's invincible, I guess. So maybe if I get shot at, maybe I'll dramatically change that. But I was going to avoid going to events after the Charlie Kirk thing. But then I think it was Eric Trump and a couple congressmen and JD Vance and Elon Musk started like bullying me on Twitter. And I was like, fuck no. I'm not going to leave now. Because I feel like
Did you say bullying you?
Bullying me.
What is that? Bullying.
Like tagging the FBI and saying I need to be demonetized or whatever. Yeah. So I think if I see that, one of my big things is to some extent, you have to lead by example. And I'm like in one of the most privileged positions possible. So like, how can you ever tell people you have to fight against the system and you got to do this and that? And they're like, but also I'm too scared to go and speak at public colleges now. I don't know. I feel like for me to have any serious or real political opinion, I have to be willing to do that. Otherwise, like, what does it count for? If I'm not willing to step out and do anything, then, and at the end of the day, right, whatever risk exists for me, that risk might have been made 100 times worse after Charlie Kirk, but it's still probably a very, very small percentage, right?
Do you wear a vest or have security or anything?
There is a good amount of security. I'm not going to tell you what I wear. That's top secret. If I want people to know the caliber, they need to penetrate my...
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild to think. Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Yeah. If you ever see a picture of me and I look fat, it's just because I have my thick 4 plates of ceramic armor and Kevlar vest. And that's the only reason. Otherwise, I weigh 105 pounds, 8% body fat.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I like it. Well done.
Thanks.
You said you're about to go on a new diet and gym journey.
So I can fight.
I like
in
it.
real life.
I'll be very interested to see how far that goes. Dude, every time we get to spend time together, we don't always agree, but I do find you have a very sharp mind. You think through these things in a way that gives me a fresh way to think about this. If you were going to make one sort of appeal to the audience, you're willing to put yourself out there, you're willing to take risks, to sort of sway where the public is pointed, to get the herd to move, what would be the final thing that you would leave them with if they were just going to focus on one thing?
I think this is more feminine than masculine, but I learned this after my 30s. Writing stuff down can actually be really illuminating. I think especially as men, maybe because women go through like hormone cycles. I think as men, I don't think we're always aware of how our emotional state impacts our like how we're thinking, like cognitively. It doesn't feel like those two things are so connected, but they are. I think it's good sometimes to sit down and write out, like, in a general sense, like, where do you think the world is going in 1, 2, 3 years, right? So if you're on the right, you might think, okay, I think that our economy will be up a little bit. I think that the fears about Donald Trump delaying the election or trying to take over the polling booth, I think that's dramatically overblown. That won't happen. Write these things down because it keeps you honest with yourself. And then same thing, on the left, if you think that, I think that Democrats are going to sweep the midterms because our messaging has gotten better or whatever else, just like write things down, because what it does is in a year or two, when things start to happen, we're very good at lying to ourselves. And if you have it written down, then you can start to see, okay, am I actually making good predictions? And the important thing is that if you're making bad predictions, that's great, because then you can go back and you can say, okay, well, prospectively from that time, what could I have thought differently? Like, what am I missing? And then like change your thought patterns accordingly. There might be a thing that you're constantly over-indexing on or constantly under-indexing on, or something that you're just missing. And then it's good to adjust your thought pattern as you go forward. Yeah. So writing stuff down and making predictions and then like really holding yourself to check those every 6 to 12 months, I think is good. Because I think it's good for your personal life too, but.
No, agreed. Very much so. Where can people follow you now?
Hopefully, if my channel doesn't continue to get attacked, it's Destiny on YouTube, Destiny on Kick, and the Omniliberal on X, but don't go to that one if you're sensitive, because Gets pretty crazy over there.
It most certainly does. Awesome. Well, guys, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more. You've said a quote, though, that I think is really powerful, which is there's no historic society that has looked like us that didn't have a revolution. And I want to get a sense of what is it that we look like?
The best example I've gotten recently since we last spoke